Good morning or afternoon to all fourth graders from Shady Grove. Today's science lesson is over food chains and food webs. Last lesson was over producers and consumers, and that lesson builds upon this lesson also. Behind me, you'll see an anchor chart. I'll take a picture and post this also for you in the lesson plans for this week. Let's go through it together. The top thing that we want to start with is the title. The title is Food Chain. A food chain shows the direction energy moves through organisms. And so when we look at a food chain, some people get confused thinking that it's who eats who, but it's actually the flow of energy of organisms. And so we're going to check that out next. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the sun, because the sun is so important. The sun is the main source of all energy in an ecosystem on Earth, because that's where the energy all originates, is from the sun. However, there's one organism that gets the direct energy from the sun. So the sun supplies the entire food chain, because without having the sun, the originator of the food chain wouldn't have its direct energy. And then therefore we wouldn't have any food. When you look at the sun, it's going to give direct energy to the producer. I chose to make grass as the producer, but I want you guys to really always remember that there are two types of producers that are the main big categories. One type is a photosynthetic producer that goes through photosynthesis. The other type is chemosynthetic organisms that go through chemosynthesis. When you look below producer on the anchor chart, I have a list of types of things that go through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. Photosynthetic ones are going to take in sunlight. They're going to take in carbon dioxide and water, and that's how they make their forms of energy. And the form of energy they're going to make is going to be glucose, which is a sugar. You eat glucose every day. So these plants are going to make glucose. Different things that go through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis are plants, algae, some protists, and some bacteria. So always remember producers, when we represent them, a lot of times you're going to see flowers, trees, bushes, but don't forget ever that algae, some protists, and some bacteria also are considered producers. Once that producer has maintained its energy and gotten the energy, it took in sunlight, it took in carbon dioxide, and it took in water. It's now made sugar and that glucose, and now it has energy for its own life and for its own survival. The next one on our food chain is going to be a primary consumer, and this is a mouse, is the example that I used for the primary consumer in this food chain. Notice the arrow is pointing from the grass to the mouse. That does not mean that the grass eats the mouse. That means that the grass gave energy to the mouse. So those arrows are always pointing in the direction energy is flowing. Really, in nature, what happened is the mouse ate the grass and the grass gave it energy. But the food chain is only going to represent the flow of energy. So we see the arrow pointing to the mouse. He's a primary consumer. And another name that we call primary consumers is herbivores, because they're only going to eat plants. They are the first consumer in a food chain. Therefore, their name is primary consumer. They're the first one that has to eat for survival or absorb nutrients. But in this case, they're going to eat for survival. You go to the next level, which is each of these I want to explain to you are called trophic levels. So producer is the first trophic level. Primary consumers are the second trophic level. They're the first consumer, but the second trophic level. And now we're to the third trophic level, which is called secondary consumers. And these are organisms that will eat primary consumers. And that's how they get their name, because they are the second level of consumers, because they consume the primary consumers. There are two types of these. They can either be a carnivore, which means that they eat meat only, or they can be an omnivore, where they eat meat and plants. When you go to the next level, you're going to get to the tertiary consumer level. The tertiary consumer is going to eat the secondary consumer. But notice the arrow is pointing from the snake to the eagle, because the snake is going to give energy to the eagle. And the eagle is therefore called a tertiary consumer. They can either be a carnivore or an omnivore as well. And so they could eat meat if they're a carnivore, or they could eat meat and plants if they're an omnivore. These are the 4 trophic levels that I needed to cover with you guys today. So again, it's producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. Each of the arrows are pointing in the direction the energy is flowing. There's one other topic though at the bottom that you may be curious about, and it's called the decomposer. What's different about the decomposer is that you notice arrows from every single trophic level are pointing to the decomposer. The reason that the decomposer has an arrow from the tertiary consumer, the secondary consumer, the primary consumer, and the producer is because the decomposer will decompose plant and animal matter. It will decompose the grass. It will decompose a mouse. It'll decompose a snake, and it'll decompose an eagle. So decomposers break down plants and animals. They break down dead organic material. Examples of decomposers are fungi, and that's what's up here. A mushroom is a fungus. And so this picture is a fungus, and it's a type of decomposer. Don't forget, decomposers are also consumers. So the only thing on this poster that's not a decomposer is the sun and the producer. Everything else, consumer, 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 consumer. Decomposers just consume in a different way. They absorb the nutrients and take the nutrients from the organism they are attached to. So again, back to the examples. Fungi, which is a type of a fungus, is a mushroom. There's other fungi, but one type is a mushroom. There's also bacteria. Snails are a decomposer. Worms are a decomposer. And they are able to break down organic matter into a form that's better for our earth. And so decomposers are a big part of our ecosystem and keeping it really stable. I hope you guys have had fun learning about food chains. Go on down through the rest of the curriculum over this topic and have a good time. Thank you. Bye, guys.